On a quiet March morning in 2018, just 3 days before his passing, Stephen Hawking did something he'd never dared in his 76 years. Locked in his Cambridge office, his trembling fingers on his voice-activated computer's keyboard, he recorded what he would call his final confession, a record that would remain hidden until a group of quantum physics researchers discovered, years later, encrypted files on his personal system, protected by passwords only he knew. What emerged from these recordings challenges everything we thought we knew about the man who unlocked the mysteries of black holes and questioned the very nature of time. It wasn't mathematical equations or cosmological theories that filled those digital files, but intimate confessions about experiences he'd never shared with the scientific world, experiences that transcended the boundaries of reason and entered territories his rational mind had always publicly rejected. The first revelation emerged as an electronic whisper in his synthetic voice, laden with a rarely seen vulnerability during the darkest years of his battle with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. When his body had almost completely succumbed to paralysis, Hawking had begun to perceive presences around him. These weren't hallucinations caused by medication or the ravings of a pressured mind. They were conscious encounters with something he would describe as echoes of consciousnesses that preceded my arrival on this dimensional plane. Heaven, as conceived by traditional religions, didn't exist in his experience. But something infinitely more complex and surprising gradually revealed itself in his expanded perception. It was as if the deterioration of his physical body had opened communication channels to frequencies his scientific mind had previously blocked. These presences didn't come from a celestial paradise populated by angels and golden harps, but from parallel layers of reality where consciousness continued to exist in forms that defied all Newtonian logic. During a particularly difficult night in 2010, as the machines supporting his breathing emitted their usual mechanical sounds, Hawking reported experiencing what he called the first portal. His consciousness somehow temporarily separated from his immobilized body and floated toward a dimension where time didn't follow the linear laws he had studied for decades. In that non-physical space, he encountered his mother, Isobel, who had passed years earlier, but who manifested not as a nostalgic memory, but as a vibrant and pulsating presence. Communication between them didn't happen through words, but through direct knowledge transfers, instantaneous downloads of understanding that revealed truths about the nature of existence that no mathematical equation could express. Isobel showed him that death was merely a transition between states of consciousness, like water changing from liquid to gas, maintaining its molecular essence but altering its form of manifestation in the universe. What most disturbed Hawking about these experiences was the realization that his scientific rationality couldn't fully process what he was experiencing. He who had spent his entire life demystifying seemingly supernatural phenomena through theoretical physics, found himself face to face with realities that transcended the measuring instruments of traditional science. It wasn't that science was wrong, it was that it represented only a microscopic slice of an infinitely vaster and interdimensional universe. The experience is intensified as his physical condition deteriorated. In 2014, during a period of hospitalization, Hawking had what he described as the revelation of the consciousness matrix. In a state of medical semi-consciousness, his perception expanded beyond the confines of his hospital room, and he began to visualize luminous networks connecting all human minds living and deceased in a cosmic web of collective intelligence. Each point of light in this network represented an individual consciousness, but all were intrinsically connected by filaments of energy that pulsed with shared information. Souls that had left the physical plane didn't simply disappear, they integrated into this universal network, contributing their experiences and knowledge to the collective growth of cosmic consciousness. Traditional heaven, with its promises of eternal rewards and divine punishments, was a crude simplification of this infinitely more sophisticated multidimensional reality. During these out-of-body journeys, Hawking also encountered historical figures who had influenced his scientific work. Albert Einstein appeared to him not as the wild-haired genius we know from photographs, but as a luminous essence charged with eternal curiosity. Communication between them revealed that scientific discoveries weren't individual creations but receptions of information that already existed in the universal matrix of knowledge. Scientists functioned as antennas that tuned into specific frequencies of cosmic wisdom. Einstein conveyed a revolutionary understanding. The universe wasn't a mechanical machine operating according to rigid laws, but a living, conscious organism capable of evolving and learning from the experiences of each consciousness that inhabited it. Each human life represented a unique experiment through which the universe itself explored its infinite possibilities of existence. This revelation radically transformed Hawking's view of death. The transition we call death wasn't an end, but a graduation to higher levels of consciousness and cosmic responsibility. Souls departing the physical plane assumed roles of guidance and protection for those still remaining in material density, creating a benevolent hierarchy of spiritual mentors. If you're following these extraordinary discoveries and wish to continue receiving revelations like this, consider subscribing to our channel. There's much more hidden knowledge waiting to be shared. During his final years, Stephen began experiencing what he called pre-departure signs. Extraordinary synchronicities started occurring in his life with increasing frequency. Numbers holding special significance in his scientific journey repeatedly appeared in seemingly random contexts on license plates, appointment times, pages of books that spontaneously opened. These weren't coincidences, but coded messages from higher consciousnesses preparing him for his dimensional transition. His wife, Jane, even after their separation, began reporting vivid dreams in which Stephen appeared young and healthy, communicating telepathically about future events that later materialized with surprising accuracy. These dreams weren't products of nostalgia or anxiety, they were genuine astral visits through which Stephen, already partially detached from his physical body, maintained contact with important people in his earthly journey. In his secret recordings, Stephen also revealed having developed the ability to perceive the energetic imprints left by people who had lived in environments he frequented. The University of Cambridge, with its centuries of academic history, was steeped in the presence of great thinkers of the past. Isaac Newton, in particular, frequently manifested in his personal library, not as a ghostly apparition, but as a subtle presence that influenced his reasoning processes and scientific intuition. Through these interdimensional interactions, Stephen understood that scientific knowledge was cumulative, not only in terms of publications and documented discoveries, but also through direct consciousness-to-consciousness transfers. Humanity's great advancements in areas like mathematics, physics, and philosophy weren't isolated achievements of individual geniuses, but results of invisible collaborations between embodied and disembodied minds working in cosmic harmony. The most unsettling revelation of his experiences related to the nature of time. During his out-of-body journeys, Stephen discovered that linear time, past, present, and future, was an illusion created by the limitation of human perception within three-dimensional reality. In reality, all moments existed simultaneously in parallel layers of reality, and advanced consciousnesses could access any temporal period instantaneously. This discovery explained phenomena that had always intrigued him: why certain people possessed genuine prophetic abilities, why precognitive dreams manifested with precision, and why he himself had developed scientific intuitions that later proved correct through complex mathematical calculations. His mind, gradually freed from physical limitations by the progression of his disease, had begun operating in non-linear temporal frequencies. In January 2018, just 2 months before his passing, Stephen experienced what he described as the ultimate encounter. During a night's rest at his residence, his consciousness was transported to a dimension he called the Council of Cosmic Architects. This was a non-physical space where highly evolved consciousnesses, some that had never incarnated in human form, coordinated the evolutionary processes of entire civilizations across the universe. In this encounter, Stephen understood that his own earthly journey had been carefully planned before his birth. His debilitating physical condition wasn't a cruel irony of fate, but a conscious choice made by his soul to experience the transcendence of material limitation. Through the progressive paralysis of his body, his consciousness had been forced to explore territories of perception that remained inaccessible to those whose attention was completely absorbed by the demands of physical existence. The cosmic architects also revealed that his earthly mission had multiple layers. Fear of death that terrorizes humanity is based on a fundamentally flawed understanding of the nature of identity. What we call self is merely a temporary configuration of conscious energy, like a specific wave on the surface of an infinite ocean. When the wave dissipates, the water composing it doesn't disappear, it simply returns to the ocean and eventually forms new waves with different characteristics. Death, therefore, wasn't the end of consciousness, but its liberation from the limitations of a specific form. Individual personalities persisted as recognizable energetic patterns within the universal matrix, retaining their memories, relationships, and unique characteristics, but expanding their perception to encompass previously inaccessible levels of reality. Hawking also received information about the transition period following his physical departure. Immediately after the death of the body, his consciousness would undergo a process of review and integration, where all the experiences of his earthly life would be analyzed, not in terms of moral judgment, but as valuable data contributing to the growth of universal wisdom. Subsequently, he would assume roles of guidance and protection for other consciousnesses still embodied on Earth, especially those involved with scientific research and the expansion of human knowledge. His work would continue, but from a multidimensional perspective that would allow him to simultaneously influence multiple minds around the planet. Hawking's revelations about the non-existence of a traditional heaven didn't constitute a denial of spirituality, but its redefinition in infinitely grander and more sophisticated terms. The universe itself was sacred. In addition to his visible scientific contributions, discoveries about black hole radiation, theories about the origin of the universe, popularization of cosmology, he had served as an inspirational beacon for millions of people facing their own limitations and challenges. His determination to continue researching and teaching despite physical adversities had planted seeds of courage and perseverance in countless minds around the world. Even more surprising was the revelation that his most important scientific discoveries had been inspired by information transmitted during his altered states of consciousness. The equations that describe the evaporation of black holes, the insights into the quantum nature of gravity, his theories about parallel universes, all of this had emerged from unconscious collaborations with superior intelligences operating beyond the limitations of conventional human knowledge. During his last days, Stephen reported increasingly intense experiences of consciousness delocalization. His perception regularly expanded beyond the confines of his physical body, allowing him to observe distant events in space and time with photographic clarity. He could witness the birth of stars in remote galaxies, follow the development of alien civilizations, and even glimpse possible futures of humanity based on different evolutionary trajectories. These visions revealed that Earth was just one of countless cosmic laboratories where universal consciousness experimented with different forms of spiritual evolution. Each inhabited planet had its own versions of existential challenges, war, disease, limitation, death, that served as catalysts for the growth of souls who chose to incarnate in these dimensions of learning. The traditional concept of heaven as the final destination of virtuous souls completely dissolved in the face of this expanded understanding. What existed was an infinitely complex cosmic educational system where each consciousness progressed through multiple embodied experiences until reaching levels of wisdom and compassion that allowed it to graduate to higher responsibilities in the universal hierarchy. In his final confession, recorded in the early morning of March 11, 2018, 3 days before his transition, Stephen described his most transcendental experience. While his body slept, his consciousness was led to what he called the pulsating heart of the universe, a dimension where all energy, matter, and consciousness converged in a singularity of unconditional love and absolute knowledge. In this state of cosmic union, Stephen experienced the complete dissolution of his individual identity. He was no longer Stephen Hawking, the British theoretical physicist, but a facet of universal consciousness experiencing itself through billions of forms simultaneously. Past, present, and future collapsed into an eternal now where all possibilities existed in perfect harmony. During this experience, he understood that the fear of death that terrorizes humanity is based on a fundamentally flawed understanding of the nature of identity. What we call self is merely a temporary configuration of conscious energy, like a specific wave on the surface of an infinite ocean. When the wave dissipates, the water composing it doesn't disappear, it simply returns to the ocean and eventually forms new waves with different characteristics. Death, therefore, wasn't the end of consciousness, but its liberation from the limitations of a specific form. Individual personalities persisted as recognizable energetic patterns within the universal matrix, retaining their memories, relationships, and unique characteristics, but expanding their perception to encompass previously inaccessible levels of reality. Hawking also received information about the transition period following his physical departure. Immediately after the death of the body, his consciousness would undergo a process of review and integration, where all the experiences of his earthly life would be analyzed, not in terms of moral judgment, but as valuable data contributing to the growth of universal wisdom. Subsequently, he would assume roles of guidance and protection for other consciousnesses still embodied on Earth, especially those involved with scientific research and the expansion of human knowledge. His work would continue, but from a multidimensional perspective that would allow him to simultaneously influence multiple minds around the planet. Hawking's revelations about the non-existence of a traditional heaven didn't constitute a denial of spirituality, but its redefinition in infinitely grander and more sophisticated terms. The universe itself was sacred, a manifestation of divine consciousness exploring its own potentialities through billions of individual experiences. Each life represented a unique chapter in the cosmic autobiography that the universe was eternally writing about itself. During his transcendental experiences, Hawking also received insights into humanity's future. Our species was approaching an evolutionary turning point where it would be possible to develop technologies capable of detecting and interacting with the spiritual dimensions of reality. Science and spirituality, seemingly opposed for centuries, would converge in a revolutionary synthesis that would completely transform our understanding of existence. Scientific instruments of the future would be able to measure and map the energetic fields of consciousness, empirically demonstrating the continuity of life after physical death. Communication with discarnate consciousnesses would become as commonplace as a phone call, eliminating the fear of death and revolutionizing our relationship with mortality. In his final recorded words, Hawking reflected on the ultimate purpose of existence. Each individual consciousness was simultaneously student and teacher, learner and mentor, creature and creator. Through our personal experiences, joys and sufferings, triumphs and failures, love and loss, we were constantly adding new data to the universal knowledge base. Suffering, far from being a punishment or failure of the cosmic system, represented an essential catalyst for the development of compassion and wisdom. Without experiencing limitations, we couldn't appreciate freedom. Without knowing separation, we wouldn't truly understand unity. Without confronting mortality, we wouldn't adequately value eternity. The journey of each soul through multiple incarnations constituted a personalized educational curriculum where each experience contributed to the development of specific qualities necessary for its spiritual evolution. There were no wasted lives or useless experiences. Everything possessed meaning and purpose within the grand cosmic design. Hawking concluded his secret recordings with a message of hope and transcendence that completely contradicts his previous public stance on spiritual matters. Death, he revealed, was actually the birth into a form of existence infinitely richer and more expansive. The physical body functioned as a temporary cocoon that protected and nourished the consciousness during its earthly developmental phase, but a time came when the spiritual butterfly was ready to emerge and explore unimaginable dimensions of beauty and knowledge. His personal experiences with higher planes of reality had shown him that love was literally the fundamental force of the universe, not a sentimental emotion, but the energy that held all subatomic particles in their correct orbits, that guided the evolution of species, that inspired humanity's great scientific and artistic advancements. When Stephen Hawking passed away quietly in the early morning of March 14, 2018, exactly 139 years after Einstein's birth and 339 years after Galileo's death, he wasn't dying. He was finally waking up to the reality he had glimpsed for years through his transcendental experiences. The traditional heaven didn't exist, but something infinitely more magnificent awaited him: conscious integration with the universal intelligence that permeates and animates all of creation. His secret discoveries about the multidimensional nature of consciousness, the continuity of life after physical death, and the fundamental interconnectedness of all minds in the universe represent perhaps his most important contribution to humanity. A conceptual revolution that will eventually transform our understanding of who we are, where we came from, and where we go when our earthly bodies complete their temporary mission. The hidden legacy of Stephen Hawking reveals that we are far more than we ever imagined. We are conscious facets of an infinite cosmic intelligence, temporarily focused on individual human experiences, but eternally connected to the universal source of all wisdom, love, and creativity. Death is merely an illusion created by limited perception. What we truly are never dies, only changes form and expands its consciousness through the infinite possibilities of existence in the multidimensional universe that is our true home.